This is Space Minds by SpaceNews. In this week's special CEO series edition of Space Minds, we're at the World Space Business Week in Paris. In today's episode, Space News editor Mike Gruss talks with Pacome Revillon, CEO of Novaspace, to unpack the satellite race, defense spending shifts, industry consolidation, and the future of AI in space. But first, a short video from our CEO series sponsor, Black Sky.
Hello and welcome to the Space Minds podcast in partnership with Black Sky. I'm Mike Gruss from SpaceNews, and we're here in Paris at World Space Business Week. We've had a series of CEOs and leaders on the podcast this week, and today is no different. We're here with Pacome Revillon, the CEO of Novaspace. Pacome, thanks so much for joining. It's been a very busy week for you, and lots going on at multiple sites. I want to start with what you've been hearing with this week. What are some of the themes that you've noticed over and over again with the folks who are on stage across all of these conferences?
So thanks for inviting me to this discussion. So, well, it's been an extremely busy week, so difficult to summarize. It's just a few words, but it all started certainly with everything happening in communication and direct-to-device being one of really the highlights. I mean, there were already transactions announced last week, but there were even new ones between several parties announced just this week. So clearly we see that this is an important part of the market moving and accelerating as we speak. The other part has been also some about consolidation for the commercial sector, and also some of the plays where do you deliver service, do you deliver assets that are also with that notion of sovereignty in the background. And we had at the same time the very defense-focused discussions that is very much about where we are now, the absolute requirement in terms of preparation, given the space that it will be in a few years, but also how you manage that kind of gap of transition period for the armed forces and with their own sovereign capabilities, but also very much working with industry and possibly in different ways.
Well, let's start with direct-to-device, because we were talking just briefly beforehand. I said, is it safe to kind of think of this as a race? But we had the big announcement last week with EchoStar and SpaceX. We heard this week from Viasat and Space 42, and they're putting together. The way I saw it when I listened to them, it sounds this is a Starlink alternative for countries or governments or customers who want that sovereignty, that control. How do you see this race shaping up, if that's fair to say, and what do you see happening next there?
So first, I mean, it's confirming now accelerating is certainly that D2D was considered as quite a long-term prospect, and now it's a shorter and shorter horizon. And clearly here with the two aspects, one is really about the spectrum, which is obviously a very key issue from partnering with MNOs to leverage their spectrum and work together on building essentially a network or an extension to MNO network, control your own spectrum, which is very much the deal between EchoStar and SpaceX, which is the first fundamental. What spectrum will you leverage to deliver capability? And is it partner spectrum, is it yours? And so your private network or an extension of another one. So this is the first very strategic race going on at the moment in the posture of the different companies. And the next is about the network and whether we really talk about text alert message, but the big part of the game being how far can you go in data delivery, going to kind of broadband smartphone experience. And certainly a lot of focus has been on the broader market, universal access everywhere for consumers or professionals, but I could see very well the role it can play in sovereignty. I mean, when you think about all the automated assets in the future, today the focus is a lot about drones, UAVs, platforms that can be pretty small actually, and where direct-to-device capabilities can really be an important stake in the next decade.
What kind of numbers? I know when you spoke Monday, you said I want to say 300 million users by 2030.
I think it's a fair statement. When you consider the capability first, obviously it will be a regulatory matter. How many countries can you really serve and enter? And obviously, depending on how you do it, I mean, the big leverage, EU, an extension of the MNO, and if, obviously, it's also a matter of commercial approach to the users and the cost of it or the service. But if it's an extension and if it's relatively seamless to switch from one network to the other, and as the terminals are already there, you could pretty quickly go to high numbers, which can go to that 300 million type numbers by the end of the decade. If you then go for really your own spectrum network, it also requires to really deal with the manufacturers, the Samsung, Apple of these worlds, to enable the capability of those new generation of devices you will have in your end. So this obviously may take a bit more time at the roadmap. So yes, I believe those numbers are realistic, and it's also pending deployment of the network into orbit, obviously, that matters, that regulatory play, and have the service deliver that large scale.
One of the other themes you just touched on was military spending. I think there's always been there's been a lot of interest, particularly in some of the NATO countries, putting more toward defense, and the thinking has been a lot of that money will go towards space. I think there's been a lot of interest this week and in the coming month or the last couple of months about dual use technologies and what that looks like. So talk to me a little bit about where you see that market for military, and especially outside of the United States.
So first, I mean, just because of the geopolitical context as it is, so we've seen already increases in defense budgets, certainly in the last 2-3 years in a set of countries, but clearly as well, at least the commitment objectives in quite some countries to increase significantly the share of GDP that goes to defense is something somehow that has been released as strategies, but that would have to turn into actual budget just in the next year or next couple of years, and then turn into actual procurement. So it's global defense spending. It won't be just about space, but clearly, just looking at Europe, NATO countries, we look about hundreds of billions possibly that should flow into defense capabilities. And obviously, even the share of what space is, it's relatively small in global defense spending, but this has regularly increased in recent years because space is increasingly critical. And part of the discussion this week is that in some application domain, space used to be quite strategic for planning of operations, and more it gets closer to the tactical edge, meaning in real time really have a direct impact on decision making, kill chain and others. So that's also a different perspective. And because of the speed of those changes, clearly, I think the question for defense is what are to be pure sovereign capabilities, what can be faster and a better acquisition scheme to work with industry as well. So again, buying assets, buying data, working with industry to see how also to best operate some of those assets. We've seen very much some industrial players in military exercises invited to be kind of joint working groups to see how to optimize the use of space. So that are some of the trends which will obviously have an impact on the market. And somehow you see, we talked a lot about broadcasting decreasing, for example. In the telecom market, defense is perceived as an anchor tenant for some new satellite programs. And it's also very true, obviously, for remote sensing, everything, data collection, and so forth.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Who are some of the winners and losers with this change, even within the space industry?
So, well, it's still a bit early stage to say for the actual winners.
You got to put you on the spot.
No, but that's very true. But actually, obviously, in some companies that have performed very well, just here in Europe, a company like ISI, I think, signed agreements with, well, let's give a good 5+ countries just in recent months. And actually, it was either direct sales or it was also in joint venture or strategic partnership with an incumbent defense stakeholder, for example. So we see those partnerships happening. So globally speaking, there was also a surge in obviously remote sensing consumption in the last 2 years, and now maybe a bit of an interim phase before it starts again when the budgets really flow into the industry. So we're a bit in that interim period. Obviously, there are new programs in the US. We'll have to see who are the contributors. In Europe here, there is that IRIS² program. Discussions with industry are ongoing. The contract or the prime contractor may be chosen by the start of next year. That's kind of the calendar at the moment. So some of that is happening, but I think it's also government will have to choose also in all the startups, newcomers, new capabilities, which one they consider the most critical to them in the next couple of years, also to enable those to get scale and support them.
I want to switch gears a little bit and just talk more broadly about the space economy. You talked about some numbers Monday. Yeah. I think size of the space economy, which is something people are always curious about, $596 billion. Yeah. Goal on path to 944 in 2033. Talk to me about why that number matters. I think people get very excited to say space is soon going to be or on its way to $1 trillion economy, and connect those dots on why that resonates with people besides being a big round number.
Yeah, so I think there are two or three aspects to it, and I agree certainly very much that we talk about the economy, then we would talk about what is a core space capability up to kind of signal delivery or some value added. I think both numbers matters because at the end of the day, what space is about is also to solve either some strategic, social, or economic issues. And somehow the space economy, where governments are obviously very important, tenants, stakeholders, users, finances, to have that idea of the representation of the impact is also important to size the role of space in the activity and in the economy at large. So I think that's important also from that sense. The other part of the equation that we see at the moment is companies are looking at what is their value proposition, what is the return on investment. So not saying one company can address the entire space economy, but just if you can move the needle a bit, are you just delivering satellite? Are you delivering an end-to-end capability, or vice versa if you came to terminal and others? So what's your position, but how can you also go to the extra value in that global economic play? And obviously there's no company that can deliver everything, yeah. But at the same time, if you just move or enlarge your kind of addressable environment, that is, I think, quite important for sure.
How about from the investor standpoint? There's obviously a lot of folks watch what's said here this week. What are you hearing from investors? Where do you see opportunities for consolidation, mergers, acquisition? What's happening there?
So I think firstly, and there are quite some reasons for that, because of that transition period we are in, because of all those technological, economic changes, there's been already an accelerating, round of transactions the last few years. I think I mentioned about 50 plus on average this year. And we've seen already a series of them, including this year. And we talk about the spectrum transaction, but there are also those it's more than rumors, those discussions between the largest incumbents in Europe for satellite manufacturing who could come together, Airbus, Thales, and Novaspace. I don't have any deep secret or revelation right now, but it's obviously in the public domain.
It's still happening. There's still talks, but
active discussions, at least certainly, and it's made progress. But that's any such kind of transaction. So, but this is happening. We're just at the end also of the SES conclusion of the transaction. So I certainly expect that more of that will happen. And as well, many companies are now just also 8-10 years old in the sector. Again, there will be winners and losers, but I certainly expect that we'll see more consolidation. Again, each application domain may be somewhat different in maturity, depending also on national support or whatever. But I see that coming in the next 2 or 3 years, even more, because you also need scale, you need addressable market. And for the more incumbent companies, you need to adapt to the new market as it is. And it's quite a rational approach as well to consolidate and bring forces together for some of them.
I was a little surprised, but I don't think you were. But I was a little surprised we didn't hear more about China this week. So what's your view on that?
So I think first...
because obviously a major player in space.
It's not been discussed so much, but when we talk about the space race and how quickly the progress is in China, I mean, you could also turn to social media without what's really behind the scenes. So it's progressing extremely fast on every capability, from going to the moon exploration to other kind of security-driven capabilities and so forth. So yes, it's not been spoken so much necessarily or directly, but in many of the discussion on accelerating the pace, having D2D, having Constellation available, delivering, because China-based companies are also reaching out and trying to commercialize some capabilities. And from the sovereignty side, again, accelerating, being at the right level of capabilities, being able to understand the situation in the different parts of the world and so forth. Clearly, you could see that China, one of the largest space powers around the world right now, is certainly one of the biggest topic challenge behind the scene, obviously, for both defense but also the industrial sector, because obviously you will continue to see protected market, but in a large part of the world it's a quite open market for any industry. And certainly I expect to see more and more kind of competition, confrontation in that part of the world as well, between the different industries, including Chinese companies.
I want to ask two more quick questions. One, about AI. I think from where I sit, I think it's hard to kind of wrap your arms around how AI is being used in space. And I think there's lots of applications for AI, but it's really hard to understand at a granular level. Where are you on AI in space? How do you see that changing?
That's a great question, and that's a great question for any single industry in this world, I suspect, right now. No, but in serious matters and in the discussion, it's been pretty obvious that the first application and where it's been going the fastest has been around remote sensing and trying to get automated analytics. So the point where we are is obviously there's a lot of tests, even in other parts. It's how to make use of it, but how you could also see the flow. So you can't trust it for critical capabilities yet without at least control, review, and so forth. So I think many companies, and actually during the fireside chat I had with Gwen Shotwell earlier in the week, we talked about it, and the SpaceX have started to use it to make trials and so forth to solve some problems, but it's more kind of an addition, augmentation test that is still relatively recent. So I think in industrial process, in design, it will come step by step. And also with obviously the notion of having secure AI capabilities as well. So your data stay protected in the right environment.
A lot that's taken for granted.
Yeah, kind of. But so there's all those challenges. So it's getting there. All companies, I think, are conducting trials, but it will take step by step and a few years to be really fully applicable to the different layers of the space capability. The last thing, which, and I had discussions around lunch yesterday, it's still true that I believe today every single student for engineering, economy, whatever, is also using AI at the moment. So those generation of people that will come to the industry in the next, well, right now in the next few years, even more, they will have been used to use those tools. I think in many companies, they will be keen on using them. So you have also to find the right framework. So I think all companies are trying to work around that, make it live with sovereignty, the security component, and dual use of space. But to me, it's where I'm saying we're only scratching the surface. It may be also our job at Novaspace, but it's quite difficult to predict what a space asset will completely look like in 2040, 30, 35. How have you thought of it? How have you designed it? Whether new material could happen, and what's the asset, how autonomous it will be, and how it will act in space. So I think that's really, it's a great opportunity and challenge all together, but I believe the transformation will be just massive. We just have to give it still a few years to get the right level of trust, capability, and reliability that we need in space.
All right, last question. A year from now at WSBW, give me a bold prediction that I can. So remember when you said this?
No, so the industry is moving so fast. So we'll see about next year. I mean, the purpose here has been to welcome the transformation of the industry, to embrace it, whereby we had that first forum on defense last year. We had an innovation forum this year. So I think next year we'll talk about more of those transactions. I think launcher will be a critical topic. I mean, we talked about Starship, other capabilities, but obviously deploying some of the new potential architecture goes with the launch capability, access to space. So I think that will remain a critical issue to see where we stand exactly. And then there will be some other M&As, and actually those discussions we had on defense budgets within a year, supposedly part of that should be in the budgets and be actioned. Yeah. So that I'm pretty sure will have a significant impact and will be a big topic of 2026.
Great. Pacome, thanks so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. I'd like to thank our partner Black Sky for helping with this podcast. All of our coverage from WSBW is available on spacenews.com. I'm Mike Gruss. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.